But I had to comment on something that Obama said in his speech about the humiliated Palestinians who need to be able to govern themselves. A recent poll of Arabs who live in the Jerusalem area actually stated that 80% of the Arabs that live here would prefer to live under the Israeli rule because the Palestinian Authority is so corrupt. And in Israel, there is prosperity and democracy and freedom of religion and all the things that the Arabs in the surrounding nations are on the streets protesting and dying for. So this whole notion that Arabs are somehow suicidally depressed that they don't have their own nation is pig slop, which in Israel is a far worse insult than the leftovers that bulls leave around. And as for all the arguments about settlements, let me explain. Israel's a tiny country, not a lot of places to build. And so with high demand and low space, housing is extremely expensive. You could start looking for a dinky apartment at $250,000, and Israelis don't make that much money. And so if you go 10 minutes that way into the Judean hills, otherwise known as the West Bank, prices are less than half. And in building homes out there, Jews have no problem hiring Arabs to do the construction. So during that 10-month freeze that everyone was like, oh yes, this is fantastic, you had so many Arabs that were out of work that had nowhere to feed their families. And that's the kind of frustration that leads to uprisings. You know, like in Egypt, no food for your family. But it's okay because the Palestinian Authority, you know, Mahmoud Abbas, our partner for peace, has actually passed a law just a few months ago that if you're in jail for terrorism against Israel, they'll pay you. It's okay. They'll cover your costs in jail, they'll give money to your family, they'll even give you benefits for your children in school. However, if you're in jail because they caught you stealing cars or something, you don't get your salary. You have to have been assisting some sort of terrorist activity. Which brings me down to this point. You cannot negotiate ideology for concrete material. And by that I mean, when you say, I give you land and you give me peace, that only lasts as long as the ideology lasts. Take Egypt, for example. Israel gave up the entire Sinai Desert 30 years ago in exchange for a peace treaty with Egypt. And that lasted as long as the one guy in office wanted to keep that. And now that he's been outed and the new people in town are saying they don't want to keep this peace treaty, what are we going to do? Do we get the Sinai Desert back because you don't want to keep the peace treaty? No. And that's why Land for Peace works about as well as it did for the Indians in America. Fortunately for the modern Indians of America, while people can argue different justice issues, the average American doesn't want to annihilate the Indians off their reservations. And I have to add that there are many Arabs in this country that love this country, they serve in the army. They're an absolute wonderful addition to the variety of cultures that we encourage here. And I find it very unfortunate that the leaders in the surrounding nations could really care less about the Palestinian refugees and only use them as some political pawn for the destruction of some people group they were trained to hate. And the only way the Palestinian Arabs are going to pull themselves out of this situation that has been perpetuated by their brothers in surrounding nations is to educate their own children to live and let live. And when their culture starts changing, they will see that peace and freedom are not the fruit of violence and hatred, but rather of love and tolerance. There's so much more to say about this, but hopefully that cleared up a few issues. And next time we meet, I will have increased the population of this Jewish state by 1. Stop, think about it, meditate.